Hey everybody, Pastor Vern with the daily update for Friday, May, what is it today? May 15th, 2020. Another day closer to being together again. We had our discussion this week of the Trinity. We're going to close out this week's daily updates with a little talk about Eucharist or communion or the Lord's Supper, whatever you want to call it, whatever your preference is. It is one of the two sacraments that we recognize in the Methodist Church. That the other one being baptism, and the Eucharist is really uh, a sacramental means of grace, a sacramental means of receiving God's love and mercy. And when we come to the time for communion, and this has been a little bit of a gray area during the pandemic because under normal circumstances we would never do communion in any way except in person. That the leader is in person, that the or else that the elements that you would receive have been blessed and then taken to another location for someone who maybe is a lay person or lay minister to distribute them. And so it's been a little gray. We've gotten the kind of the go ahead from the bishop to do things a little different during this time because for a lot of folks, communion is a very important part of their relationship with the church and with Christ and with God. And so we wanted to, we have been made some allowances to do this. We've done it over online a couple times now. There are some other alternatives. They're called love feasts, which is a part of the Wesleyan tradition. Love feasts were used when there was no clergy available in order to bless the elements. It has some of the same significance, but it just isn't done in the sacramental means of grace. Jesus instituted this on the night of the Last Supper, as sometimes it's called. He instituted it as they were doing the Passover meal, changed the format of what his followers would do from that point on, in order to do this in remembrance of him. We do this as a reminder of his sacrifice, of the measures of what he was willing to give. We use the juice and the bread as symbols of his body and his blood that he gave up for us. But is really more of a time of coming together. It's a time where we come to the table, and even though the pastor is the host incarnate, I guess you would say, the host that is there in person, you're really coming to Christ's table. We're coming to a place where we are going to meet with Christ. Christ is actually the one who is hosting this meal each and every time that we have a chance to receive it. It's the one means of grace, the one sacrament, I should say, that is repeatable. We believe that one baptism is sufficient, whether you're baptized as a child or an adult, whether you are old enough to remember it or not. That one baptism is sufficient. But this is the one that we can do over and over again, and it has to do with the intimacy of the relationship of the meal. A meal, especially in Jesus' time, was a time when people come together and shared in a way that maybe they wouldn't otherwise. It was a thing about hospitality. It was a thing about welcome. It was a thing of allowing yourself to let your guard down, to be in this place where you felt safe and you were receiving some food and some drink that would sustain your body, and forming bonds with those around the table. And that's what we still try to do when it comes to communion, is we're still trying to form a bond of those who are ready to receive communion. Um, Sometimes it's going to be a little more difficult because we don't we may not be in the proper mindset for communion. Um, and I know people who don't come to communion at that point, and but communion is a welcoming of coming to God's table. There is a lot of different discussions about who should come and have communion. Do they have an understanding of it? In the Methodist Church, we allow those who feel that they want to come to take communion to come and receive. We don't ask a lot of questions about background, membership, those kind of things. We feel that the grace being present is the work of God, and that the communion is a form of grace that we can celebrate together. I guess probably one of the things that about communion that is special, even beyond the interface with Christ at the table, the meeting up of the body together, is the words of institution, which is when he talks about the blood and the body, when he tells his disciples that this is my body that is given for you, and you do this in remembrance of me. And that's one point that we remember the sacrifices that Christ made for us. And then the second part is the part that sometimes I struggle with. And I think you've seen me possibly do this during communion. Sometimes it just comes upon me. And you know, the amazing thing is, even when we were doing 4 worship services and I was doing communion 4 times on Sunday morning, when I get to the part where we talk about this is the blood shed for you and many for the forgiveness of sins, sometimes I just get choked up. You know, I just get to that point where I think, you know, I'm a nobody. I'm just a speck of dust in the universe, but Christ was willing to shed his blood for me, and he didn't shed it because of his sins, and he didn't shed it because of any great atonement that he had to do for himself. He did this atonement for me, and I've sinned, and I occasionally continue to sin. I hope between a relationship with Christ and some maturity, it's not as often as it had been. And it's not deliberate by any means. But sometimes we all sin. It's a nature of the world we live in, and a nature of who we are as humans, that evil has invaded our world. When I hold the cup, when I lift it up, and somehow when that light reflects off it, the light of Christ, it makes me stop. And it makes me think, I don't deserve this. Maybe sometimes I don't even desire it, because I don't feel as worthy of it. But God has called each and every one of us to be brought into his light, to have our sins forgiven by relationship with him, so we become worthy of that relationship. It's a special time, and I truly miss sharing that with you face to face, and I can't wait till we can do that again. It's probably the one time in all my ministry where, even on the mornings where it's a job and not worship, particularly, God takes my breath away. That God says, you, my beloved child, were worth a great sacrifice. And it's really hard not to take that with a small bit of sorrow, but with a great deal of joy, that he sees me and he sees you worthy of this great gift. Y'all take good care of yourselves. Stay safe. Watch out for each other the best you can during this time. I pray that we will soon be together, that we will find a way to celebrate all these means of grace. I hope this finds you well and deep in faith. See you next week.